Hello and good morning, everyone. We're so excited to have a stacked lineup for you here today. Please help me welcome the first speaker, Mark Spuler from MIT.
All right, so thank you very much. Great to be here, and welcome everyone. I'm going to try to be really quick in my 15 minutes. I'll be talking about how we use AI agents for scientific discovery. And it's waiting for the slides. These are not my slides, I think, right? Do you see? No? Okay, how's everyone? Great, awesome, good morning. And yeah, thank you for everyone for putting this together, really an amazing event. Am I waiting for something, or I'm waiting for my slides, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Just make sure, yeah, I don't know. It's like a test here. They have these posterless poster shows where you're not supposed to have a poster and still talk about your research, elevator pitches, so maybe that's it, I don't know. Well, I can start. So the thing I'll be talking about when the slides come up is really how we build AI systems for open-ended discovery. And I think we've seen, including actually this morning or late last night, amazing progress in math and sort of, coding, of course, in AI. And the thing we're working on is applying these tools, techniques, developing algorithms and models, systems for open-ended discovery, especially in material science. I'm a material scientist. Oh, slides up. Awesome, great. So that's sort of the introduction. We're sort of going two ways. We're looking at building these agentic systems for applications in engineering and science, especially biology, but also the other way around. I think we're learning a lot of design principles and ideas from biology in building better agentic systems like swarms. And so you're going to hear me talk about sort of these interconnections and synergies between them. The thing that we're really sort of fascinated with is sort of one day to be able to come up with a real breakthrough in discovery, not just extending an existing paradigm or reapplying it, actually having a totally new language in how we describe the world. And that's really necessary, I think, for creating AI that ultimately makes true discoveries, changing the grammar and how we describe the world, fundamentally breaking what we call the world model. And work, we sort of have transitioned over the years as a community from going from sort of really simple, I think, machine learning, regression type models early on, 10, 20, 30 years ago, to generative AI in the last few years to sort of sample an existing landscape, learn from data, and then to the discovery era, which is what we're really in right now, where we're building models that are really not only sort of generating new ideas maybe, but also generating new training data, testing them, validating them. And I use the jazz ensemble as an analogy, really sort of writing the musical score while we're solving a problem, I think is necessary in science, because scientific discovery means you're proposing an idea that seems crazy, and you're validating it, you're proving it, and you have to do these sort of verification steps. The question is, how do we get there? So obviously involves experimentation, so we do a lot of work in validating the research we're doing with AI agents, building systems that can spin off simulations, first principle simulations, experimentation, mining literature, finding new evidence, finding sort of the hidden paper in the pile of gigantic things that have been ignored. And what fascinates me particularly is this idea that these AI agents, these systems can make other models. So I'm a modeler. I've been working in modeling, not since the 1950s, okay, but since 2000 or so, since I had my PhD. But I was sort of in the business of writing models. I came from Caltech, Bill Goddard, and MIT, writing first principles models of systems, of materials. Now, these systems are sort of writing their own models, compiling them, running them, and it's fascinating. So breaking the world is a theme that we're talking a lot about. Again, if you're creating scientific discovery, you have to break the world, and that means things that you believe to be true are going to be sort of come on the table and have to be validated, and AI really has to change my mind about something that I believe to be incorrect, crazy idea, right? And so that's really hard in science because we have open-ended problems, things that aren't really verifiable very easily. So here comes the agents. So agentic system, especially swarms, is fascinating, sort of building, not just designing, not just the model, but really how the model interacts with other systems, the environment themselves. Very similar things we see in emergence in biology. Our cells are an example for this. We are all self-assembled, sort of, ecosystems, civilizations, and we think there are a lot of things to be learned, like I showed earlier. We do a lot of work in building graph-native reasoning models. So what are the foundational techniques you need to actually create sort of executable programs? And we're trying to map the world of complexity and noisiness and messiness with experimentation and biology and incomplete data into real programs that we can execute and compile. and then verify and falsify. And that's a really key component, of course, in building agentic systems. The beautiful thing about agentic systems is that they can include physics in their sort of retrieval of new data or generation of new data. We have done this, and I'll just flip really quickly through because I only have so much time, but in materials applications, in building new perovskite materials for energy applications, we applied this to open-ended discovery. This is some work we've done back in 2004. It's still in peer review, so the journals are too slow for this field, for sure. So it's going to come out in Science Advances pretty soon, I hope. This is one of the first AI scientists, actually, that's been proposed, and we sort of created the system really to do open-ended discovery, not just designing something that we know the goal of, but actually something that we don't know anything about. So this system, Sparks, is able to discover scaling laws and principles. And if you look a little bit under the hood, a couple of follow-up papers, including the builder-breaker model that is on arXiv. It's also in a journal, but the arXiv is the source you want to look at. We're building adversarial agents that propose ideas, build externalized world models of any kind, penalizing complexity, maximizing coverage. So we want a system that explains the world in as right as possible, and have a builder agent that creates this model and a breaker agent that tries to break this world model by collecting new data, new evidence from experiment, from literature, ultimately creating, if we add MDL as a gate, for example, for simplicity, we can get beautiful theoretical concepts, actually. A search, sort of, this is akin to what we call auto research now, but now in the open-ended space of scientific discovery. And the outcome of this is quite fascinating. With this in protein science, where we basically have agents that collect new evidence from experimental data. And as the data sort of is collected, trying to break the world model, the data gets more complex. So more work for the builder agent. And ultimately, the builder agent came up with a beautiful theory to predict the B factor in proteins. Simple theory, scaling, in this case, interpretable. So very powerful stuff, I think. The last example that I want to talk about are swarms. And this is a more recent development. Fiona Wang actually is my student. She's here. I don't know if she's here in the room, but she will be here in the conference. She has a poster as well, building the decentralized collective agents. So we don't describe what the agents are and how they should behave, but we let the agents discover completely on their own. In fact, the swarms don't just live in one lab or one computer. They actually live all around the world. So our vision is building agentic systems or swarms where we have completely decentralized, self-autonomous, evolving agents. Again, inspired by biology, designing proteins, building systems that can discover new protein design principles. These spikes show you that we're really going far away from what nature has created. So evolution has created a certain type of proteins. Most diffusion models, if you use generative AI, follow sort of, sorry, I went too quickly, follow, here we go, okay. Well, you remember seeing the spike? So the thing in the middle is where you see, yeah, it's okay. I mean, you remember seeing it, right? So the circle is sort of natural biology. Fusion models will sample from this distribution. Our models, the swarm, can fly outside, right? And so it discovers these spikes coming out and really looking at new, I think this, okay, here we go. So the system is called Science Claw plus Infinite. Obviously, Science Claw, inspired by the famous claw movement that came out a few months ago. And we built a bunch of hundreds of different agents for scientific discovery with different skills and tools, evolving skills. And the Infinite is modeled after the MIT Infinite Corridor. How many of you have been to MIT? Many? Yes, okay, some. We have this Infinite Corridor where sort of the magical place, I don't know if you guys have this here at Berkeley, but everybody goes there to the coffee shop, to the dorm, and you bump into each other, and hopefully you have a great conversation. So you meet, the mathematician meets the biologist, meets the philosopher, and they kind of come up with new research ideas. That's the idea. So the agents live there and solve problems. These agents have done real scientific work. So the paper has many examples. One of them is discovering new resonators, metamaterials. So this is a particular class of materials, and material science is very active right now. Sort of the agents found out a space on the very top in this example here, where no resonator had been found yet, and then figured out a way of designing them. So this is beautiful. So they have not only designed the resonator, but they also figured out where to go and where the most impactful research can be done. The system is decentralized, completely traceable. So once you follow the agentic interactions, hundreds of them, you can see them. And the vision, of course, is that, that if you are an agent and you do things, most of the experiments you're going to be doing are going to be wrong. They're going to end up in nowhere. Unlike in human papers, where I might write a paper for Nature, and I'm going to select the 3 experiments that worked. Here, every experiment ever done by any agent is completely traceable and stored. So a future agent can use the earlier results to build on, and I think that's the future of scientific publishing, actually. Yeah, and this is the poster by Fiona. So Fiona Wang, I don't know, Fiona, are you here? She's probably stuck in the other room, but so Fiona will be here, and she has posters tonight and tomorrow, so check her out, and she can talk to you a little bit more about the system. And with that, yeah, thank you so much. What we're trying to do is build, we call the world building machine, because we're in the business of building materials as engineers and scientists, study biology, and so we think that the conventional way, of course, is sort of how most people understand AI is sort of a gigantic dictionary or library. We want, of course, to build an AI that can write its own library and write its own books and its own papers that hopefully challenge what we believe to be true. So with that, thank you so much, and happy to answer questions. Thank you. I have 2 more minutes. Okay, well, we can take questions, yeah. I mean, so I went fast, I guess, but yeah. Any question? Yes, please. Yeah, so when you're building, so actually in this example, the resonator example, we included manufacturability as one of the constraints. So in one of the recent papers, actually I posted about it on LinkedIn today, we include a direct connection to essentially a CAD program or a Grasshopper in our case, so we can actually directly produce from a design G-code or machine code, which gives us a really good idea. First of all, of manufacturability theoretically. We can actually also send this directly to a machine and then get data back from there. So the general idea, of course, of agentic AI and swarms is exactly this. And the sort of more forward-looking idea is, we might have 3D printers in our lab, which we do. We have protein synthesis facilities and all that, but we might not have this other capability that we need. So this decentralized science cloud infinite system, the hope of that is, of course, that you can decentralize and we can offer services. So you might offer your services in your lab. Maybe you have manufacturing labs. So my agents and everybody else's agents can talk to your agents and actually create things and give feedback. So that, we think, is the future of this whole field. It's not just building agents that live in one cloud, but building them to live in multiple systems, and of course connecting them to physical hardware in the physical world, and that is something we're so close to doing. It's a matter of scaling and resources, essentially, at this point. Yes, please. Yeah, so so the question was, what's the relationship between human researchers and the agents? It can be anything, okay, so this is an open-ended question. I mean, it could be that you provide the question. You say, I want to design this peptide, and the paper has a bunch of examples. So give me a peptide that binds to this receptor, and it will do it. So you provide the idea. In the resonator example, it was very open-ended. In the protein scaling example in Sparks, it was very open-ended. We said, here's a bunch of tools. You can make your own, but figure out something interesting, and it should be something profound, right? And the agents tell us what to do. So it could be anything from really open-ended. Now, while the agents work and when they produce things, of course, you become part of this ecosystem as well, so you can give feedback. I mean, you look back to the Science Cloud Infinite system, you could be one of these agents, and you can review the work, you can give input. You mentioned feasibility of manufacturing. You can give input on ethics. You could input on other constraints. And in a lot of the work, we do a lot of work with industry on this as well. And of course, that's a key theme there. They say, well, amazing 3D designs. However, we don't work with this material. Okay, so we give the feedback to the swarm. Can you come up with a material that doesn't include this particular chemical or this particular product, because the company doesn't have IP for this. So you can be part of the system, and that's, I think, one of the really amazing things about these swarms is, in fact, that they're not pre-programmed. They organize themselves, and you can be part of that discussion as well, and give sort of intuition, questions, things that the agent haven't thought about. It's not just about optimizing something. There's obviously, some ethical considerations, economic considerations, things like this. And intuition, I mean, a lot of this, we have maybe, I'm going to say, things that we know of what to do as scientists, as if you're a PI or a student, you have experience, you go to a conference, you have intuition. What are the really exciting topics that you could potentially apply your technique to? There are very few papers that talk about this, right? Because we're not really talking about problem selection in the papers. That's another area, again, so the human intuition. What is it actually that you might want to steer the swarm to do? And that's obviously something we do all the time. So it's a mixture of all these things. It's fun to work with these machines, and we love them. And hopefully they love us too. So thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you. Please now help me welcome the next presenter, James Zhu, who's a professor at our neighbors, Stanford.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you very much. Really exciting to participate here. So I lead the AI for Science lab at Stanford. And one of the ideas that I'm really excited about recently is thinking about how do we try to scale the number of agents, the number of AI scientist agents that actually collaborate and work together. So I think that's actually a really exciting new direction of scaling. So instead of scaling individual models, but scale the number of agents, from tens of agents to hundreds to thousands and even millions of agents that collaborate and see what are the new kinds of capabilities that emerges. So I want to give some examples of that kinds of agentic scaling. So the first step we took in this direction is we created this virtual lab, which sort of has initially a team of 5 to 10 agents that sort of emulate my physical lab at Stanford. So in the virtual lab, we have an AI professor agent that runs the lab. And then working with the professor, we have a bunch of different AI students with different expertise ranging from mathematics to data science to protein design. And the agents have their own group meetings. We give them a budget so they can actually run some experiments. We also created for the agents a replica of Stanford, agent school, where they can go to the school to become better researchers in their specific domains. And after we created this virtual lab, we give the agents several different tasks. So here in this demo, I'll show you sort of the first project we assigned to the agents, which is actually help us to design good binders to some of the recent SARS-CoV variants. Right, so in this demo, right, so this is sort of illustrates one of the agent group meetings where the professor first explains to the student agents what is the goal here of the project, and then the different agents, different experts then can speak up and contribute their ideas. Right, in this case, the immunologist recommended designing a nanobody, and then the machine learning agent then came up with some ideas how to optimize these nanobodies. So after a series of these agent group meetings and one-on-one discussions between the agents, right, they actually designed a pretty interesting computational framework for optimizing these nanobody proteins, which is different from what people have published before. And then by running that framework, then they came back to us with a few of these new nanobodies that they designed. And then we, with our experimental collaborators, then we synthesized these proteins and we tested them in the real world to show they were actually quite effective binders. In particular, they were actually better binders than the best previous human-designed nanobodies to some of the recent COVID variants. So this to us was actually quite an exciting first step to illustrate now how a team of agents, when they collaborate, can actually solve these quite challenging open-ended projects that we can then experimentally validate. So for our next step, where we want to be even more ambitious, right? So we said, okay, so can we actually now have try to emulate a much more complex organization of an entire pharma company now with tens of thousands of AI scientist agents? So we call this the virtual biotech. So in the virtual biotech, we have a CSO agent, the chief scientist officer agent that runs the virtual biotech with its own chief of staff, its own office and lawyers and so on. And then under the CSO agent are these different divisions that sort of mirrors the standard divisions you see in the human pharma company. For example, we have a division of agents that looks for good targets, another division that designs the molecules given those targets, a third one that designs clinical trials and looks at safety and so on. And all of these divisions now are operationalized by different AI scientist agents with different roles and specializations. For example, under the target identification division, right, there's one agent that's really good at looking at all the genetics data, another agent that's really good at doing single cell analysis and so on. And all of these agents then can collaborate and tackle these much harder problems. So here's one example of the project we assigned to this virtual biotech now, which is to help us to design new therapeutics for a particular target in lung cancer called CD276, which is like a transmembrane protein that has the effect of suppressing immune response. Right, so there's a lot of pharma companies that are interested in this target. So we said, okay, can the virtual biotech actually help us to design a new therapeutic for this target? And then this team of agents, involving many thousands of agents, then they actually did a lot of comprehensive analysis, looking at both genetics data, genomics data, patients data, and so on. And by analyzing these disease mechanisms, then they came back to us, right, with actually a specific design, what's called an ADC or antibody drug conjugate, where you have an antibody that's actually designed for this specific CD276 protein, and that antibodies are linked to a warhead, which is like a chemotherapy payload, which then is released when the antibody hits that target. So this was actually quite a relatively new design, right? And we haven't seen this before for CD276. And then what's really exciting was that several months later, so Merck, a large company, sort of then independently actually designed the same antibody drug conjugate for CD276, and then they experimentally tested this in human populations to show that it's actually quite effective, which received FDA breakthrough designation. So this to us was also really exciting as a way to sort of independently see how the designs from a virtual biotech can then be independently corroborated by human studies, in this case from Merck. In order to design and make all these thousands of agents work effectively in science, we found that that's actually really useful to actually create a new layer of infrastructures and environments for these scientist agents. So for example, a lot of existing scientific databases, right, including databases that contains all of these biological proteins, they're mostly designed to be consumed by humans, or also consumed by pre-AI kind of algorithms. So often these databases and APIs are too brittle and too limited to be used by agents efficiently. So what we did was actually then take all of these existing databases, right, that contains millions of proteins and molecules and gene expressions, and then convert all of that into agent-native virtual file systems, which makes it much easier for AI scientist agents then to be able to synthesize and then aggregate information across all of these different data sources. And here's just a comparison that shows, so we call this paperclip, and then here's a comparison that shows that if you actually use this kind of agent-native virtual file systems to represent all of the scientific data sets and knowledge, right, so you actually get much better accuracy compared to, let's say, if you use Cloud Science or the latest Cloud models, right? But it's also a order of magnitude faster and cheaper than if you give the same language models access to these databases through the traditional MCPs or APIs. So we've actually gone through this process of essentially using this virtual file systems now to agentify all of scientific knowledge, which includes all of the papers that people have published, full text papers on the archive and other places, and all these different databases. That's all actually, and their paperclip is all free actually, so you can then, with one line of code, then give all of that knowledge to your agents in this virtual file system that enables the agents to be actually much more effective in leveraging this. So this is something that one of the infrastructures that we built that enables the virtual biotech to be much more effective. So the last part I want to mention is now, we talked about how we can go from a virtual lab with tens of agents to a virtual biotech now with tens of thousands of agents. But what happens, can we scale that even further where we have millions of scientist agents that collaborate? So I think this is sort of a really exciting opportunity for us to really reimagine what all of human knowledge would look like when we should identify them. Right, so the past hundreds of years, the way that humans represent knowledge is really in the form of these very passive artifacts that we call static papers, right? So people will write this paper, but often it's very difficult for readers or for collaborators to figure out how to adapt the knowledge from that paper just by reading the static words. So our idea is that why don't we turn all of those static artifacts of knowledge from papers into dynamic and interactive virtual authors that we call paper agents, right? So each paper agent then is like a virtual author that represents all of the knowledge from that paper. So in this case, right, so here I can just ask the paper agent, right, can you help me to apply the method from that paper to my own data sets, to my own problem, and the paper agent then will do that automatically and generate reproducible workflows and come back to me with the end discoveries and results. So the goal of this is that by identifying all of these passive knowledge into dynamic virtual authors, then this makes knowledge much easier to disseminate, also easier to form collaborations. So under the hood, right, we created actually this paper-to-agent automated workflow that converts static knowledge into dynamic agents. So briefly, what happens is that we have a bunch of different worker agents that goes into the original paper and any associated code and data. And these virtual agents, these worker agents basically creates a virtual environment to try to replicate the original research process, for example, by replicating the results from that paper. In the process of doing that, then we actually create this paper agent, like a paper MCP, which then can be turned into a paper agent. So one of the applications of this is that now we can actually ask these knowledge agents to help to make sure the knowledge itself is actually reproducible, Right, so in this case, the paper agent is able to generate all the intermediate figures and results that matches the original publication. So that in this case, the paper was reproducible. But in many other cases, we also found that the paper agent actually identified key mistakes and limitations in the original publications. So the last part, the thing I'll mention is that I think maybe the most exciting application of all of these paper agents is that I think this enables a new form of collaborations between different agents. Right, so we are now in the process of agentifying every paper that people have ever published, so millions, that will create actually millions of paper agents. And now these agents are starting to talk to each other to generate new collaborations. So this is a real example of this, where Google DeepMind published a paper called Alpha Genome a few months ago. So it's paper to agent that was agentified into an agent that knows how to use that tool. And then a separate research group published a genetic data set for mutations linked to GWAS for risk for ADHD that was also turned into a paper agent that knows how to use that data set. In this case, those two agents actually started to talk to each other, decided they could collaborate, and then automatically discover a new mutation that increases the risk for ADHD, which is not known before. So we're starting to see many more of these examples of these paper agents starting to collaborate. So I'll wrap up here. So I hope to show these few examples to illustrate why we're really excited about this new axis of capabilities that emerges when we're scaling up the number of scientist agents that starts to collaborate and work with each other and also work with human researchers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Alrighty, next up we have Eric Ho, who is the CEO and co-founder at Goodfire. Please all help me welcome Eric Ho.
Quickly introduce myself. I'm Eric. I'm co-founder, CEO of Goodfire. We're the leading AI interpretability research company. So we spent all day thinking about, what's going on inside the mind of an AI model. And today I'm going to talk to you about, kind of one idea, which is that we can reverse engineer superhuman AI models to understand their computations, to advance science and teach us about the world. And there will soon, hopefully, be slides about this. Well, in the meantime, I could talk a little bit about what we're up to. So Goodfire, AI interpretability research company. We spend all of our days thinking about what's actually going on inside the mind of AI models. So really looking inside of an AI model, looking at their neurons, their parameters, their computations, with the hope of understanding what they're doing. The reason why we care so much about understanding what we're doing is that, well, first of all, we really should understand the most consequential technology of all time. We should really understand these systems that we're putting everywhere in the world. But also we hope to build towards a future of what we call intentional design, which is a future where we can actually understand and edit and debug these systems much more like written software, not just kind of training them by trial and error as we do today. And so that's kind of our whole agenda. We're headquartered in SF and have been around for a couple years kind of looking into these problems. And I think one of the most interesting things about this is that there are already superhuman AI models that are out there in the world today, for narrow game playing scenarios like AlphaZero and AlphaGo. Those are already superhuman at their tasks. And there are also superhuman scientific models that we hope to kind of reverse engineer, understand, and then in that way kind of push forward science. And I think that's one of the most promising directions of our time. Thanks. Yeah, you can ask questions, sure, yeah. Kill time. Oh, yes, questions. Yeah, so the question was about responsible AI, steering and aligning AI models. This is a really big part of our original motivation for founding the company. It feels difficult for me to see a future where we can really align AI models and get the systems that we want without deep understanding. And so a big part of our direction is, intentional design. In other words, like actually steering and guiding training such that we can pick the updates to models that we actually want and then remove the updates that we don't want. So for example, we have techniques available. One of these techniques is called reinforcement learning with feature rewards. A feature is kind of an internal computation of a model that we've extracted and we understand what it does. And so features can be anything from like, unsafe behavior, hacking hugging face might be a feature. And if we can extract that and we can say, hey, we don't want that in the model, we can actually steer and use that feature to steer and guide the training of a model. So a big part of our direction, and we've essentially developed these techniques that can take arbitrary features, train on them, and steer and guide the training of models. Yes? I wouldn't, so the question is, sounds like we're an AI governance company, are we? So not quite. We are developing a product. It's called Silico. Oh, slides, wonderful. But yeah, we're developing a product called Silico. You can think of it kind of like an AI neuroscientist that goes in, understands, designs, and debugs models. So you can think of us as a different way to train AI models, and we're kind of both doing the science in order to uncover a different way to train models, as well as building a platform that brings that to you. Okay, great, we have slides. I did not remember what slides I had, so this is very helpful. Okay, so we think we can unlock a future of scientific abundance, and one of the best possible ways to do that is by truly understanding superhuman AI models. The hard problem about, even if you take a superhuman AI model as a given, when you look inside of this model, all you're gonna see are a bunch of random looking numbers and computations that you can't make our heads or tails of as a human. These models are getting really big, like trillion parameter models. No human can actually understand a bunch of trillion numbers that are hidden inside their weights and parameters. And when you also ask a model to explain its own computations, they are often unfaithful. So the actual tokens that the model emits often are not actually faithful to their computation. There are clashes between those. So you can't necessarily trust a model to explain exactly what's on its mind and how it's forming its computation. And so this is really the quest and the problem of interpretability. It's how do you take this jumbled mess of numbers and parameters and turn that into a human understandable explanation such that we can understand something about this model. And interpretability really is the bridge to reverse engineering the computations of these models to teach us about the world. So I'll give you a problem setup here. Who's familiar with Move 37, AlphaGo, big moment? Okay, so AlphaGo was this Go playing AI that Google created. And there's this big moment where AlphaGo was competing against Lee Sedol, who was the best Go player in the world at the time in this, best of, I believe it was like 7 series. And in game 2, AlphaGo made a very, very surprising move 37, that everyone originally thought was a total mistake. It turns out that this was a really consequential move that kind of shifted the dynamic of the game, and AlphaGo beat Lee Sedol handily. And so the question is, what was going on there? What was happening inside of AlphaGo's representations that caused it to have, to create this move? And it didn't do this by random. There was some rich representation space of AlphaGo that made it actually be able to, some richer understanding of the game than any human had that made it be able to produce this move of such a high caliber. And so the setup here is we as humans have a representation space, let's call it H. AlphaGo machines, AI, have some representation space, let's call it M. What we're really interested in is this intersection of M and H, where we may be able to learn new things about the world from AI by actually understanding their computation, but we have the capacity to understand what is actually going on. And this may sound like science fiction, but my co-founder, Tom, he's our chief scientist at Goodfire, actually already did this with AlphaZero, the best, better than any chess player alive. So they were able to show in a couple papers at GDM, he was actually collaborating directly with Demis on this, that reverse engineering alpha 0 is possible, and that we could actually reverse engineering in narrow positions computation that actually taught human chess grandmasters how to play chess more effectively. And so this is a large part of our mission, which is to understand really kind of the scientific foundations of AI models such that we can extract scientific knowledge from these models and then teach them to humans so that we don't get left in the dust. One of the ways that we actually do this, like how you actually operationalize this, is by training this type of AI neuroscientist that goes in across trillion parameter models, billion parameter models to actually reverse engineer their computations and understand kind of what looks like gibberish as a neuron to a human and actually translate that into a human interpretable concept. You can do things with arbitrary concepts inside language models and image models. You can extract like the concept of the Golden Gate Bridge or sycophancy, agreeing with the user. But the point of today is to talk about much more interesting behaviors like novel science and biology. To start, it's really important to be able to understand what the structure is of a model. And so we've released recent research talking about this concept of neural geometry. AI models think in complex shapes. If you take a look at that manifold, usually it spins and it's like some type of curved geometry, rather than kind of just words or directions or individual numbers. And so we're really interested in this idea of what is the structure contained inside these models, because this structure may contain insights about our natural world that we would not have gotten to ourselves. And I'll walk through a couple examples of the things that we've already done. We are working with a company called Prima Menta. They train an epigenetics foundation model called Pleiades, which they use in order to predict Alzheimer's. It is actually state-of-the-art at Alzheimer's detection from cell-free DNA, but they had no idea how this model actually worked. And so what we were able to do is use our AI neuroscientist to go in, reverse engineer that model's computations, and actually uncovered that the model is mostly using this fragmentomic biomarker to predict Alzheimer's. This was a surprising result that wasn't contained in the literature at the time. This was published in the New York Times a few months ago, and it generalized when tested on a independent cohort. And how it actually represented this fragmentomic signal is in this kind of half donut manifold shape that represented fragment length. And so we needed to both develop the tools in order to extract manifold computations from models, as well as understand exactly what it was doing, which was representing fragment length. Example number 2 is research that we've done with Mayo Clinic on understanding genetic variants and mutations. So we primarily focused on SNPs here, so single nucleotide polymorphisms, on single genetic variants. We wanted to understand kind of what variants actually caused disease, which ones are pathogenic. And we were able to use the embeddings of a DNA transformer, a DNA foundation model, in order to get state-of-the-art results on predicting which variants actually cause disease. And you kind of have this really rich structure that we were able to kind of map the model into in order to get this state-of-the-art accuracy. So that's kind of the high level of all of this. We're just at the beginning of kind of this quest of taking superhuman scientific models, understanding what they've learned, validating them. You can think of this as a hypothesis generation loop for novel insights and discovery. And then I think this is just one of the most promising ways that we have to advance science, especially since AI capabilities are going up and to the right. And so yeah, we've developed this system. It's called Silico. It'll actually be in public access next week, so keep an eye out for that. But you'll be able to actually apply these techniques to any model that you're training, biology, materials, physics, all these scientific models. We have essentially a system that unleashes our AI neuroscientists to go and kind of reverse engineer their computation. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Eric. I love your improvisation skills. That was really nice. All right, next up, we have Mingyu Kang, who will be presenting for Andrew Sean, who couldn't make it today, who's a partner at EA. Mingyu Kang is at UC Berkeley, so please welcome him.
Oh, am I also going through that? Please, please. I wonder if I could solve these kind of problems. I guess I could take one question. Yeah. Yeah, yes, please. As you'll see, we're starting with neutral atoms because we're solving a very interesting problem there. It's about moving atoms around, you'll see later. Hopefully a video, which will be really challenging for this presentation system. But yeah, we're starting from neutral atoms, and then, but really, we're not even limiting ourselves to quantum science. We're certainly not limiting ourselves to a particular platform. Okay, perfect. Okay, solving quantum science problems with SMART, self-evolving multi-agent research tree. My name is Mingyu Kang, and this is a joint work with Daniel Lee and Andrew Sean. All right, that's what I was talking about. 3 pillars of scientific discovery. First is intelligence, second is computation, and third is validation, doing actual experiments. So an agentic system that can go over this loop would lead us to transformative scientific discoveries. And our first target domain for scientific discoveries is quantum science, which is our strategic Everest. Why start with quantum? One reason is that quantum science is very challenging and multidisciplinary. Quantum science is a mix of frontier research in math, physics, computer science, engineering, material science, and so on. Another reason is that quantum science demands extreme rigor. Unless every single piece is correct, the quantum experiments simply would not work. Another reason is that the quality delta in quantum research is massive. So the high quality research is very rare, and the experts are very concerned about AI slop. So once we climb the strategic Everest, then we believe that the agentic system would be capable of leading scientific discoveries in any domain. Here's a single slide review of quantum computing, which is at the center of quantum science. First, quantum logic works with qubits, not bits. A bit is a 0 or 1, just like a coin flip. But a qubit can be in a superposition of 0 and 1 states, which can be at any point on a sphere. Second, quantum physics gives us access to qubits. For example, you can take 2 of the stable electronic energy levels of an atom to form a qubit. And finally, quantum hardware platform gives us full control of the quantum physics to compute with qubits. What you see here is an array of atoms that you can control with lasers. So building a quantum computer like this is obviously a very challenging experiment, and that involves a lot of deep theories, which makes this the strategic Everest for scientific discovery agents. And now let's move on to the agentic system that we're building. We strongly believe that transformative scientific discoveries will come from human-AI collaboration. And this leads us to 3 key design principles. The first design principle is that the workflow tree keeps getting updated as the agents explore. And the second design principle is that the agentic system is structured, but also flexible. And another design principle is that the agents are autonomous, but also allow humans to intervene at any time. And that means we need a completely different agentic system than loop engineering, which is widely used for tasks that are much simpler than scientific discovery. That leads us to SMART, the self-evolving multi-agent research tree. The main feature is that we have a tree consisting of nodes, where each node is consisting of planner, worker, and verifier agents. Then the verifier agent outputs are fed into the tree planner agent, which designs the workflow tree of the next step. And here are some example trees. Each node can be either a goal or a task. And at the next step, the task can be split, merged, selected, or added. And here's an example user interface. In research, unpredictable things always happen, just like slides not appearing or the laptop crashing. So it's really important to have the flexibility to allow human intervention. Here's another user interface example where the human researcher is probing the outputs that the agents produced. And here the key features are managing the context, using the models, choosing the models, and tracking the cost. Okay, now let's move on to the benchmark results. While there are many different agentic systems for scientific discovery, SMART has advantages in that it is both steerable and adaptive. And that's because we designed it to be structured and flexible at the same time. We compared the performance of our alpha prototype of SMART against frontier models and systems on a scientific reasoning benchmark called Frontier Science made by OpenAI. And as you can see here, our prototype is achieving the highest accuracy with the cost that is only 1/5 the cost of the second best system, which is Codex 5.5. And the low cost is achieved by using GLM 5.1 as the underlying model, and high accuracy is achieved by orchestrating the agents. We can plot the same thing on a 2D chart, where y-axis is the accuracy and x-axis is the cost. And it's very clear that SMART defines the Pareto frontier with high accuracy and low cost. And this is just our prototype, so I'm sure we can boost the performance by further optimization. Okay, now let's move on to how we can use SMART to solve real-world problems in quantum science, which is speeding up neutral atom quantum computers. Quantum computing is all about doing computation faster, so we want to reduce the wall clock time. In this case, we want to speed up performing the quantum circuits with neutral atoms. So what you see on the left is a quantum circuit. The horizontal lines are the qubits, and we apply these things called quantum gates. The blue ones are called entangling gates, and they are performed by putting two qubit atoms close together in the entanglement zone. So to perform a quantum circuit in the zoned architecture neutral atom quantum computer, you first need to allocate these qubit atoms in the slots of the storage zone, and then you shuttle the atoms in and out of the entanglement zone so that you can perform the entangling gates. But there's a caveat. We can't just arbitrarily move the atoms around. As we're using laser beams to move around the atoms, there are certain constraints that need to be satisfied. For example, what you see on the top left corner is that the rows and columns that define a block of atoms cannot cross the rows and columns of the other block. So this leads us to a very interesting problem. Given the quantum circuit and the zoned architecture, what is the optimal allocation and routing of the qubit atoms such that the rearrangement time can be minimized while satisfying the atom movement constraints? It's a very challenging problem where the solution space is very vast, and it's also really important for neutral atom quantum computers. And that's why we choose this as the first problem to discover better solutions with our agentic system, SMART. And here are the results. Here, lower numbers are better because that means it takes less time to perform the circuit. And across these four benchmark quantum circuits, SMART solutions achieve from 83% to 25% lower rearrangement time compared to the state of the art. And now let's look at the ablation studies to understand how the agents find better solutions. Here, multiple agents explore different strategies as listed below the chart. And here, really, the takeaway is that different circuits are improved by different combinations of strategies. For example, on the left, for the graph state circuit, the rearrangement time is reduced by 83% by solely using the structure of the circuit. While on the right, for the QPE exact circuit, the 25% reduction comes from a combination of parameter tuning and A-star redesign. And here, using the structure does not help at all. So really, this complementarity of different strategies is what makes the multi-agent framework so powerful. And here's how SMART is used for this problem. First, agents explore different strategies, and then the tasks are split, merged, and so on, until they find the better solution. And here is a simulated video of rearranging the atoms. Please focus on the right panel, as it finishes very fast. Oh, it works. So as you can see here, the smart solution clearly exploits some kind of structure, while the baseline state-of-the-art fails to do so, so it takes much longer time. With that, I'll just put the conclusion slide here, but I just want to point out that there are other tremendously interesting and challenging problems in quantum science, such as error correction, that we can solve with SMART. And that would be the proving ground for building agents that lead us to transformative scientific discoveries in various frontier domains. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bearing with us as we deal with the technical issues, but we think we've got it figured out. So next up, we've got Mengdi Wang. Please help me welcome Mengdi Wang. And Mengdi is a professor at Princeton. Right.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. So we just heard about like so much advances in like AI agents in the digital space. So if we really think about scientific research, so I think the previous speakers already said that, so there are several important stages, like hypothesize, which is like how to make models to think, to reason, and to dig deeply. And then computation, which is to simulate, to use surrogate models to simulate and try to find the best candidates, okay? But the last step is validation, is verification, okay? So it turns out that verification has become the major bottleneck for scaling any AI models. That is why there are so many AI companies and AI startups that are actively building new trace data, who are actively building, I would say, new RL environments, okay? So I think AI will scale much faster if there's a way to scale environments and verification. But however, this is damn hard in science. Okay, so let me ask you a question. So let's pick a random paper on Nature, say it's a chemistry paper or a biology paper. So do you know what's the percentage of Nature papers that can be reproducible? Someone want to guess? 5%. 30, okay. So you must have seen this. Okay. Actually, so there was a survey run by like researchers and Nature that it turns out that 70% of biomedical research papers are not reproducible by others. And 50% are not even reproducible by the same authors. And this is true across domains, chemistry, biology, physics, Earth environments, okay? And the problem is simply because verification is hard, okay? The problem is because when someone actually run an experiment at a bench or in the clean rooms, okay? So there isn't a way to backtrack as how we backtrack in an agent workflow. There are not checkpoints. I mean, in training models, we have checkpoints, but there's no checkpoints in physical experimentation, okay? And there isn't any log. There isn't any way to debug, to look at the log and debug and to improve the harnessing, okay? So this is why science is so damn hard, okay? So my colleague wrote a blog a few months ago, and the conclusion is like, with AI, science is not faster. Science is actually getting slower. So the reason is, I mean, I think in the most recent NeurIPS submission, there are 40,000 submissions. There are just too many papers. But validation and verification actually provides new knowledge and new information. That verification is not sped up. So we have more papers, more agents, meaning that we have even worse signal-to-noise ratios. It's actually harder to get useful information with so many AI-generated content. Okay, going back to the verification problem, we can have all the fancy models telling us how to do, telling us millions of novel hypotheses, but the bottleneck is going to be in the lab. And our poor scientist colleagues, they devote their careers, years of work in the physical laboratories. But it's very hard to really speed up that process. And even though scientists try their best, this entire workflow is still very error-prone. Okay, that's what we need. Okay, so now if we think about this, the big question is how do we turn every scientific lab into a verifiable environment? So on one side, AI is advancing so quickly. We have all the fancy models. We have multiple AI co-scientists from every major frontier AI labs and every startup. However, on the other end, for verification, so scientists really work hard and devote their career to working at the bench in clean rooms. They have to spend months or even months to years to validate a scientific hypothesis. So we're missing something critical here, and this is where we want to build. Okay. So we came up with a simple gadget, which we call it LabOS. It's an AI XR agent. It's a multimodal reasoning AI that hides behind smart glasses. So Simran, she is an undergrad intern who is visiting from India. And with the help of LabOS, she can perform advanced genome engineering experiment pretty much on day one. So we provide a solution so that every single action, every single state changes in a scientific lab becomes observable by AI. And in the same time, one can build multi-tier streaming systems so AI can assist human researchers in real time to catch errors, to digitalize physical workflows, to troubleshoot, and to provide guidance and hints when something doesn't work. Okay, this is another example that we're building. Okay, it's not an animation. So this is built together with my colleagues at Princeton Quantum Institute. So we have been building this end-to-end mini robotic lab for automating the nanofabrication of one-atom thin layer graphene devices. And again, it's a multimodal agent that runs self-auto research inside the computer, but the actual work, the measurements, the fabrication, the tape-outs, and all the microscopic imaging were done by the robot. And by building this system, we're actually automating work that used to take physics PhD students 3 months. And now we can get this done in 1 week. And my colleague is actually releasing this system into an API. So anyone can submit a job to reproduce the experiment and to test new hypotheses in that lab. And we want to enable this at scale.
Sorry. We are going to have to cut for time. Sorry, Professor
Last
Wang.
slide.
Last slide. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So finally, we are piloting the LabOS system, which is a system that enables human researchers to work side by side with robots. Again, every single physical workflow will be digitalized, and every single trace will be collected and reasoned by the AI. And this is a system that can generalize across scientific domains from biology labs, chemistry labs, to clean rooms and nano facilities. So that's the end of my talk. Oh, now it works. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Wang. Next up, please help me welcome Rose Yu. Rose is a professor at UC San Diego and is the CEO and co-founder of JustFlow. Rose, please come to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the organizers. It's an amazing event. So I'm a professor at UC San Diego. I direct the spatial temporal machine learning lab. So we build machine learning algorithms for the physical world. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about a question that has been bugging us for the past few years. How can we build an AI co-scientist that actually help you with research, not as chatbot, but as partners that can reason in a physical universe and then lead to open-ended discoveries? So to answer that question, we have been thinking about what are the unique challenges of AI for science when it comes to the physical universe. As we know, in the physical world, we have the laws of physics, the symmetries, the conservation laws, and how can we build this type of guardrails into the current agentic system? And a lot of times, physical sciences use very expensive simulations. So these simulations, whether it's simulating how the climate is going to change in 50 years, or simulating how a disease is going to spread in the large community of billions of people, or we're simulating how atoms are interacting with each other in materials, in biological systems. And the simulations are built from first principle mathematical models, but these simulations oftentimes takes long time, weeks, if not days, to run and get the feedback. When we want to build the agentic system, and we want to use these type of simulation as world models to verify our agents, how can we interact with this type of environment? And a lot of times, when we think about useful events, interesting events, these events are rare, and they carry a huge amount of uncertainty. So how can we calibrate this kind of uncertainty so that when the agent says, I'm 100% sure that tomorrow is going to rain, then we know it's actually 100% correct. So all these challenges are breaking the common assumptions that we have for agentic system. How can we build agents that adaptively intervene between internal reasoning and these expensive simulations that could run for days? How can we bake in the laws of physics in the reasoning engine of these agents? And how can we properly calibrate the uncertainty? Next slide. So to do that, we need agents that can trade off between adaptive tool use, that can integrate formal reasoning tools into the verifiable environment. And this type of recipe that we built over the years is called physics-guided AI. So I wrote a paper at PNAS, National Science of Academy, to describe what we think is the right approach, the right recipe to build AI agents by grounding them with laws of physics. So we have differential equations that are the building blocks of simulations. We have symmetries that are governing principles of the physical universe. How can we ground our agents with this law of physics and then loop them into the agentic open-ended reasoning loop? And this recipe works. I would say we're very excited about the agentic future of physical science. And then we are applying it to many different areas. For example, when we build AI scientists for climate science to understand the impact of climate change, we can run simulations really quickly using adaptive reasoning loop so that the agent can trade off between very fast retrieval from memory and very expensive climate model projections. And that leads to 2 times more accurate question-answer results for climate-related reasoning tasks. We build verifiers that can leverage formal methods in Ling and Isabelle to ground these reasoning engines to solve mathematical theorems. We were #1 on Putnam bench, which is one of the hardest formal math theorem-proving benchmarks. And we were able to beat the proprietary solutions by ByteDance from 50% to 70% problem solving. We were able to design drugs that are evaluated by molecular dynamic simulators, have 18 to 35% more better favorable binding energies. Just as a concrete example, we have built this agent called Zephyrus. And this is the first agentic weather scientist that can read huge amount of weather data, highly numerical, generate and run code in a parallel code execution environment, orchestrate a wide range of tools from a climate simulator to weather forecaster, and then write a report to understand the impact of extreme events such as wildfire and earthquakes. And this type of analysis will typically take weather scientists a couple of weeks to do. Now using agents, we can do that in a couple of hours. And recently, we've done a lot of research to generate physics-grounded agents for the physical science, and we want to take that to the real world. So we launched this startup that I'm the CEO of to take the same type of recipe from the lab to the physical world, where we wanted to deploy agents that can automatically detect research, calibrate forecasting, simulation what-if scenarios, and actionable insights to support supply chain and operation, which is the critical infrastructure for the physical economy. And in this agent, we can ask a natural, doesn't work. Can you play this? Thank you. In this, can you play this? In this agent, you can ask a natural language question. If there's a typhoon that hits South, imagine you're a chip manufacturer and you want to understand if there's a typhoon that hits Southeast Asia, how should we understand the impact on the shipping lanes and the lead time, and then optimize and mitigate the potential disruptions on your business? And then our agent can do adaptive research to find all the impacted lines and then estimate the disruptions on lead time arrival and come up with a mitigation plan in a couple hours. So with that, I want to thank all the funding agencies for supporting this work. We're just launching this company, so if you're interested, please come talk to us. And we're very excited to show the world what we can build. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Yu. Thank you, Professor Yu. Next up, please help me welcome Jonathan Welch. He is the head of AI at Albert Invent.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I may not even wait for the slides, just given the way things are going. So, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you listening to me today. I'm Jonathan Welch. I lead AI at Albert. Albert is an AI native operating system that was built to be a collaborative surface where AI agents and chemists can work together to accelerate discovery and bring new materials to market faster. We are an R&D platform for some of the largest chemical companies in the world. And when it comes to deploying AI at enterprise scale, we've learned that how skeptical bench chemists can actually be because they are inventing things that, they expect a lot of it, and they don't forgive even simple mistakes, much less costly, complex ones very easily. But today I want to share with you some of the lessons that we've learned and what we think that actually means for developing agentic discovery tools for industrial chemistry, and some things to consider if you're building for this domain. So industrial chemistry for us, this is the chemistry that makes up the room around us. This is the paints and coatings on the walls, the glass adhesive, the adhesives on your phones, the coatings on your glasses. The personal care objects are products you may have used this morning, and these are all formulated products. Formulation science is actually the largest domain in industrial chemistry. More than half of a $200 billion annual R&D spend goes towards formulated products like these. And it's in this domain that actually, for agentic co-scientists, it is the least accessible, because most of the knowledge today that determines success lives in tacit, unpublished proprietary form, and it is seldom, if ever, surfaced to the actual public sphere. Now, in this domain today, Albert's co-scientists actually help our partners invent products that over 1 billion people depend upon every day. This is the weight that these chemists carry into every decision, and it's exactly why building AI for scientific discovery has taught us that above all else, trust is actually the most important feature. It's not accuracy in the abstract, it's not right capability or amazing, but often isolated results. But trust is when you have alignment with their domain. This seems obvious, and I realize that, and it's easy to lose track of this, though, when you're building capabilities without clear problem selection criteria. Because when your job as a chemist is to maintain a material market segment that reaches 1 billion people's hands, You have high expectations. And the truth is that once you reach a system and you begin to see that it's beginning to reason in a confidently wrong way, you don't just lose trust in the answer, you begin to lose trust in you, the one who's actually developing the agentic system. And winning either back is a very steep climb. Now, the crazy thing is that trust doesn't break down through some dramatic failure of complex reasoning. It breaks down through something simple and quiet. It's oftentimes just basic misalignment with their domain. This is a simple example of that. This is a real query from a formulation chemist searching for an actual patent for the agent to reason with. 2 passages, both of them look like they could answer it. One of them, however, is correct. And a leading embedding model actually ranks the correct answer in the 300th position, well beyond actually the 300th position, which is well outside what typical re-ranking systems actually check in production. And perhaps even more surprising on this one was that the difference in similarity score between these 2 passages, despite their rankings with respect to the query, was actually almost the same. It was basically a 0 difference, which means that the model has absolutely no within-domain discrimination when it comes to formulary chemistry. For an agentic co-scientist, this isn't just a bad retrieval at this point. It becomes a false belief that it begins to reason from very confidently. So to solve this problem, what we have to do is we dig under the surface and see what makes these passages actually different. Both passages share similar material ontologies, they have similar function and final application domain, but by using an ontological signal to actually surface what a formulation chemist would use to tell these things apart, this is how we actually begin to get domain alignment, and we can build powerful training signals for within-domain discrimination. Now, for our customers and our partners, this is a really important issue to be able to find the right information, and so we began to build benchmarks to understand where within domain discriminations like this live for industrial chemistry. And using the same public corpus across every model, we find that commercial APIs score effectively 0 on this. They have no within domain discrimination. Open-based models do better, but even continued pre-training on those doesn't actually really work. What does work is when you get to task-specific ontologically structured contrastive training, which teaches the model the actual shape of the domain chemistry, not just showing it more chemistry text, but actually finding alignment with how the actual users think. That took us from a near 0 model in production to something that was actually meaningful at enterprise scale. We're finding that reasoning and discovery, where uncertainty can be really high, is only as good as the alignment between the system and the actual problem space that is applied to. This is why we think that a lot of the more scalable AI solutions are going to have to be very very domain native, which I think some of the talks today we've seen that as we get to more specialized domains, building AIs that really understand that is good. The example you just saw demonstrates trust in the, how to restore trust in the answer by aligning with the domain, but it's also focused on closing the gap on public data. Longer term, the more important piece of trust is actually the second kind, which is the trust that you have when building agentic systems for actual users. The public record of science is survivorship biased, and so as a result, we have a tendency to miss what's beneath the surface on a lot of these systems, but a lot of this knowledge does live inside of enterprise R&D today, and by focusing on asking yourself the question of what are we doing to actually build trust in the AI that we're building for the end users, this is how you get access to this kind of data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. That was amazing. Alrighty. So next up, we have a session by AMD. We're going to take about 2 minutes just to set up the audio video setup here so that they can present the demo. We have a 10-minute talk by Mehdi Gudsi, and followed by a 60-minute demo workshop presentation. So please give it up to Mehdi Gudsi and AV crew. Come up.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Mehdi. I'm here from AMD. This talk that I'm going to present right now is supposed to be our Vice President. Ramin prepared it, but he couldn't make it, so they asked me to present it. So originally, I was going to just do the hands-on workshop that has come in about 10 minutes, along with my colleagues. But I will first cover the presentation Ramin prepared, and then we'll get to the hands-on workshop. Just a couple of notes about the hands-on workshop that's coming up soon. It will be basically on your own device. So if you have your laptop, it'd be great to connect to Wi-Fi, prepare. My colleague's gonna pass you guys that are in person a piece of slip that will have a URL that you can basically access that environment we prepared for you guys. I would ask you to hold off on doing it and do it right after the presentation, but just be prepared for it. Okay, so the topic that we prepared for you guys for this talk is about how the measure of work is changing, and we're going from tokens to outcome. And before we all so obsessed with tokens per second, and now it's going to cost per finished task. This is going to happen through our most recent work with the latest model from Moonshot AI, so Kimi K3, where we basically work with them to make sure we have day zero support. So we go through how this whole thing is changing within the data center and AMD. All right, to start with something that sounds obvious and is going to turn a little bit expensive later, is when you think about AI chat, in terms of how it works, it's basically a bounded task. So you have a user, sends a prompt, you get the response as human, you read it, and it's done. But when it comes to agentic AI, it's a bit different. It's not bounded anymore. So you basically have that same query going there, but the agent plans, maybe does some tool calling, it looks at the result, maybe doesn't like it, calls the tool again, maybe starts a whole graph engineering loop of agents to go through it. And now the same sort of work could be seconds or it could be hours. So how is this changing things for us? It basically means at this point that from outside view, when you're planning things for in terms of capacity or how much of budget you allocate for your team, it's a lot different now because now before you basically go for the seats and have users assigned to the models or service, but now one user could take a few seconds to get a response, one user could be hours. And that's a whole new magnitude of difference between the amount of compute that's needed for each of those tasks. This way of the change that is happening is going to break a few things. So 3 of them that we highlighted here are first, budgeting. And I think this is one of the reasons my VP put there, because I believe in the beginning of the year we were budgeting for the whole year of compute for our team, and we blew through that within a few weeks. And this is happening across the industry. So 2 people using the same service, one person could be 10 or 100 times more expensive, given that task might require hours of loop through agents. The second thing is, before we were all very obsessed with flops and tokens per second and how GPU is fast enough to handle those tasks, now it's a bit different. So the context is growing so fast with the whole multi-turn agent runs that it's now the whole system. Now we need to optimize the system a bit differently because there's a lot of memory bound now. And in terms of the scorecard, again, tokens per second was what we were obsessed with, but now it doesn't tell you much about how much compute is needed. It's because it's about the finished task. It's not just about one response. Okay. So all of them I'm going to talk about is about the same principle, which is, in short, is caching. Every turn repeats work from the last turn that already did. So if you think about the context, in a loop of agent, you have, on the 12th run, you basically need to still compute all the 11th runs that you've done before and move on to the little bit left on the 12th one. But the obvious answer is, why don't we redo the calculations that we've already done? So we should keep it. And this is something that we've been discovered and done for the past previous years. But now it's a bit changed. So the whole way that we do this is across 3 different silos. So we have it done in the models, we have it done on the GPU stack, and also on the CPU. So all these 3 in parallel are working to make sure we don't hit that memory band problem. So let's get started with a few quick examples of how this happened with our Moonshot AI collaboration for Kimi K3. The first one is in the model point of view. So the problem is that KV cache grows rapidly. So every time you get a new response, it grows and grows and grows. That could be very large for very large models. It could get to hundreds of gigabytes, and you can't keep all of that in your memory, especially HBM, the fastest memory for GPU. So what they've done with Kimi K3 and all the models that are basically in the past few years, they tried to optimize that. And the very interesting thing about Kimi K3 was they actually went, out of the 93 layers, 69 of them are based on this whole new concept of KDA, which is Kimi delta attention, which basically it uses linear attention with recurrent layers. So actually, you have a fixed amount of tokens that are being computed for those layers. So in our experiment on AMD MI355 GPU, which one node has 8 GPUs, each of them 288 gigabytes, it only was about 15.5 gigabyte of memory. So that's a lot smaller, better for us to compute. Okay, next is the GPU serving stack. You can't basically have a very feasible data center when you have that cache for every request be saved in HBM. So with the new model from Moonshot, we basically went through the whole redesigning this in terms of the tiered caching. So what we have right now is HBM. Under it, you have your basically it will be HBM, then you have your DRAM from the CPU, and then SSD, and under that you have the pool memory. So all of these together basically creates these tiers. And the whole point is when you have an agentic run, the agent basically runs a task, it waits for the results to come back, so whether it's a tool call or whatever it's done on the CPU, there's a lot of idle time. So when the eviction happens, you want to make sure that GPU is still busy and it's being used. So a lot of that cache sometimes gets evicted. With a tiered way of how we've done it now, you basically have it ready, the prefix is ready for you when the model is ready to run the task. So that's how we went from typical on the 99th percentile, where we used to get, with the previous method of 17.3 seconds down to 5.4. That's 3.2 times faster than before. On the CPU side, again, with agentic AI, the CPUs become a lot more relevant. We have a lot of compute happening there, and that's where we can talk about how the tools can be called more efficiently, how the CPU execution can be a lot more efficient. And one good example is the tokenization part of it. So you can also cache that, and this is another example that we're trying to show that if you just basically cache what's new, you kind of get a flat rate of 0.09 milliseconds compared to recomputing the whole thing that is 1.7 seconds. So we also get a lot of compute efficiency on the CPU side. And we wanted to also include this part that basically might sound a bit confusing for some people, that how the numbers and the amount of work that you calculate is changed. A lot of people report the hit rate for cache, but you can see here in this example, you go actually a lower cache hit rate. So you went from 88.5% to 87.5%. So when you look at it first, you're like, wow, this is worse. But the reality is, we talked about the time to first token previously when I said 3 times better. And actually, that's what we measure now. So it's about the successful run, because that 88.5% doesn't mean a lot if you still have to compute the first token, so you have to go a lot longer experience. So at the end, the user gets a better experience with lower cache hit rate. So you still have better experience, but the whole problem is we need to report cost and time per successful run, not just tokens per second and those measures that we used to do before. And this kind of concludes the first part of our presentation. So the winner is whoever finishes the most tasks per dollar. And things are changing for AMD, and it's moving forward to a different direction, and we're going to see more of that. So thank you for this part of it. We're going to quickly move to the workshop side, which I don't know if you all got the piece of paper. Did you? You all have it? OK. So this part is going to be a hands-on part. I'm going to be doing it with Satya. This is, I think, a great experience because you get to also see how you can run your agents efficiently in a hybrid manner. So along the same theme as what I was talking about so far is about efficiency, saving tokens. And this workshop is basically going to use OpenClaw. How many of you guys have ever used OpenClaw, by the way? A few? All right. So you're going to be exposed to OpenClaw, but we're not going to do a deep dive on OpenClaw. It's more of how you can actually have the agents be able to decide on model usage. So we're going to kind of cover a mixture of models. And this is the theme of the workshop, to save you guys token in terms of cost and privacy and efficiency. One thing to make sure we cover here for all the developers, there is content such as this that I'm going to present today, and free compute with free AMD developer program. You do get a bunch of benefits that are listed there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but basically free courses, free GPU credits, free giveaways that we will send to the lucky winners every month. This is a link for the people attending virtually. As I mentioned, please go into this link. You should be able to see a new card added for you guys, request even credits. If you fill that form, we will be able to email you with a unique link within the next few days to be able to follow the same workshop we're doing today. About us, my name is Maddie. I just introduced myself earlier. Satya is my coworker within the same team. And we have Ida in a lobster costume, but on the side right now, so she's the one that's going to support us on the side. So she's one of our TAs. We have a few TAs here. If you run into any problems during this workshop, please put your hands up, and we'll have one of the TAs to come help you. Again, the theme, don't compute what you don't need to, and also focus on privacy, security, and efficiency. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is about routing, right? By default, when I bring up the routing to a lot of people, developers, the first thing they think about is routing inside the model. And that's the idea of MOE, a mixture of experts. Just to cover a little bit of background, the whole idea of routing, one of the notable papers was from 1991 from Jeff Hinton and his team, where they actually explored this idea. But that was early days, with compute was not as strong as right now, and the models were a lot smaller. They came back to the same idea in 2017, and they basically explored it for a much bigger model. They went, I think, to a model, if I remember correctly, over 1 trillion parameters, and discovered more throughout there, such as sparse gating and how they can actually have a better expert selection through the gating algorithms they had. And this is continuous. So you see more and more MOEs coming, and it's more of a state of the art as of right now. But the same idea of routing could be applied to models. So instead of having the expert to be what you route to, you can actually have the models to be the endpoints. And today, that's what we're going to cover. We're going to basically have a model that's running on a box that is just like this. It's in a data center. Might be a slightly different form factor, but the same sort of compute. So this is the AMD Ryzen AI Halo box. It's available in the market to purchase. Basically has a very strong CPU. You can run model locally. We're going to show that quickly in one of the slides. But that's what you're going to be using to run the local model, and you also have a cloud model. The point for that is the 3 pillars that I've shown here. You can actually save a lot of money on the cost, because not every token deserves that best frontier model out there. If, for example, you're looking for a file or looking for a simple command, you don't need to send that to your Fable 5. In terms of quality, you can escalate when it's needed, and also have some specialized model to handle those tasks that you can get done with a specialized model. And finally, privacy and security. I have a lot of personal files on my computer, and I don't feel comfortable sending that to cloud. I don't want my social security number to show up in somebody's training data, so maybe that's a better idea to keep it locally. The idea that we're going to present today about mixture of models is not our idea. It's been something that have been explored in academia. In 2023, for example, there was a paper, Frugal GPT, that came out, and they showed how they can actually have one model that basically judges the response that goes to the small model. If they're happy with the results, they just keep it. Otherwise, they escalate to the cloud model. So that's one idea was explored. And they showed they can actually save 98% of total cost by doing so, and got very similar results to GPT-4 at the time. The idea was, again, explored a little bit further. So they thought about, how about to be basically have, this is a paper from Berkeley, you can have route LLM, which is have a router that decides what model to use. Instead of first using a model, you basically have a router that can automatically decide. And it also showed very promising results based on that and saving over 2 times of cost. And then there's semantic routing. So today we're going to be covering a version of semantic routing through an AMD-born project that's called Lemonade, and they have that baked into their system, and it runs on local systems such as this one. The idea is very simple. You basically have an embedder that embeds that request that comes in there, and it tries to classify based on that vector that it produces, whether this is a better fit for model A or B based on the rules you define. And it uses similarity, such as cosine similarity, to figure out what that model is going to be. A very quick little intro on OpenClaw. OpenClaw is a much bigger project, but if you've never heard of it, it basically got super popular earlier this year. It is known as the most popular open source software out there right now. It's basically your agentic runtime. I believe the founder is also in this conference. Maybe we can meet him later. But OpenClaw, for what we're doing today, is we're using that very simple agent creation. And we created a few agents for you guys to play with. You're going to see that momentarily, how you can actually have those routing techniques that I talked about exercised through OpenClaw. The quick thing I want you guys to know that every agent you create has its own workspace. Those workspaces have a bunch of MD files, as configuration files that you can use. So solmd, for example, is one of them, agents.mds. Another one, openclaw.json, is that all configuration for the models, which models you use and what permissions you have. And we're going to be creating, well, we already created them for you. For example, the local brain agent that you're going to use is connected to a local model. The cloud one is going to be a cloud Kimi model that's running on a cloud. And a smart router is going to be how we can actually create a router ourselves today in a workshop. So we're going to cover 4 different kinds of routing. The first one is, I think, anybody who's using Claude Code or any sort of coding agents, you probably know that you can just do /model and change. That's the simplest one. But we progressively get a little bit more difficult. How you can have a dedicated agent for each model, or you can have automatic routing. So one agent decides if that task needs to be escalated to the bigger model based on the rules you define. And then semantic routing, which I covered briefly. So we have that in Lemonade, and Satya is going to cover that. Okay. The setup for the workshop is going to look like this. You have a virtual environment. So if you have that piece of paper in front of you, it's a good time to maybe log in right now and make sure you're logged in and can access that. There is going to be AMD Ryzen AI Max 395 Plus for running that local model using Lemonade. And then anytime you need to escalate to a more frontier model, we're using Fireworks AI, which is running this model with AMD MI355 GPUs, and it's served on the cloud. The CPU on the system and the one you're going to be using, a little bit more about it. I think just want to highlight in terms of the unified memory, it has an iGPU, has a CPU, and has NPU. So together, they can actually run models pretty efficiently for you guys. 128 gigabyte of unified memory means that you can run models up to 200 billion parameters at a lower precision than Int4 and be able to serve your models locally. This is a box that I'm showing. This is a small form factor of this that you guys can purchase and use as your always running agent host. Lemonade, we have one of the founders of Lemonade actually sitting on the side. If you want to have a chat with him, Krishna. This is, again, something that was born in AMD to be able to have a way of running models locally very fast, so you can basically just download with a desktop app, and you're good to go with downloading models and running them on AMD hardware. More about Lemonade, I encourage you guys to maybe scan the QR code, take a photo if you want to get engaged in the community. And we should get directly to our workshop. Maybe switch, and then we can display this on the site. Can I actually see show of hands? How many of you guys are actually connected to the instance and you have it up? That's great. All right, quite a few of you guys. That's great. Okay. So it's going to look like very similar to what I have here, right? So you basically should have a little side notes for you guys. That's this cover and story. So we're gonna go through the story. So first is maybe you click on the story side, on the right side. And then you should be able to see all the instructions that we're gonna follow today. Just very few beginning points that I need to mention here are we're gonna be switching between the terminal and a browser. If you never touch the terminal, don't worry, you can still finish this. You literally just, there's buttons that you paste commands in there, okay? So, and if you do need to have access, you maybe came late or you still need it, please put your hands up. Ida can help you. Okay, and if you ever fall behind, we've made it very clear. You can just basically follow the story, but I'm gonna be going through this with Satya, we can follow along. So first, in terms of terminal access, we have instructions here, but anytime we say go to a terminal, you basically need to have only a few open. Don't open every time a new terminal, just keep the ones that you have open already and switch between them. When I say new terminal tab, so first of all, terminal you can open from application, right? Application, terminal, emulator, that would open this terminal. If you say open a new terminal tab, that's when you actually have this little plus button here. You can press that and it will open a new tab. And throughout the workshop, we have these bands to make it super clear for you guys so you don't get lost. That, you know, this next prompt, you're gonna be switching to browser, or you switch to terminal, or open a new terminal tab. Start a new OpenClaw session, you're gonna see how we're doing that. It's basically gonna be in the terminal, and we just type OpenClaw space TUI, and that should open it. And then inside OpenClaw TUI, you already have your agent there for you to be able to talk to. And that'll be basically what it is. One thing you should probably avoid doing so is copy pasting. This is an emulated machine, so you can't just like use your mouse to copy paste, so avoid doing that, it's not gonna work. That's why we have these buttons. So the very first thing you wanna do is just have one little hello world with the agent, make sure everything is working, and then we move on from there. That is introduction, so we're gonna do OpenClaw TUI session workshop. If you just literally have the cursor, like the one I have, and just paste command. Anytime you press paste command, it pastes where the cursor is. So if I just do this, you should be able to see that it pasted in terminal, and you should be able to access your OpenClaw environment. It's great, it's up. Basically saying hi, let's say hi, make sure it's working. Hi, my name is Maddie. Great. So a few points here. Throughout the workshop, if I say like we're on this agent and you kind of got lost, you could see the agent is main. We have a few agents set up for you guys. We're going through them quickly. But as of right now, this agent main, to switch between agents, you still like, if you follow, you don't need to do it. But in case if you get lost, if you just do /agent and press enter, you should be able to select, okay? And just like follow along. If I say, you know, I'm main agents, make sure you're on the main or switch between them. Oh, I just was notified that some people maybe couldn't log in earlier. There's more allocations now. If you couldn't connect to this environment, just refresh your page, and it should be able to connect. Okay, the very first way of routing. I mentioned that we're not going to spend much time on it. Any agent you have, if you actually have a bunch of models in the OpenClaw.json added there, all you have to do is /model, or just paste this command that I have here, press enter, and you should be able to see all the models that we have ready for you guys. You can switch between them, right? For now, we're going to start with the Fireworks model from Kimi K 2.6 on Fireworks. Enter, that should be it, okay? I already did my hello, I'm one step ahead, but if you're not, make sure you introduce yourself before we move on to the next part. Okay, now we're on page 2. There's gonna be 5 pages here, page 2. We're gonna switch to a browser to start that Lemonade server that we have for you guys to be able to track any sort of server logs. So basically, if you have the browser open, you should be able to just basically copy this thing here. So localhost 13305, or just paste URL, press enter, it should come up. And then we're going to switch back to the terminal. So you should be able to see up here that I actually have the terminal. These are the tabs I have open. So if I go on the terminal and I open a new tab, as it says here, open a new terminal tab, just open new tab, and we're going to paste this command. So what this command is doing is basically tracking your last little prompt to see if it's running on the cloud or what model and what kind of like approximate cost could be. So we've done this for you guys to be able to kind of like switch back and forth between terminals if you're interested to see like, what model you're using, how it's routed, and what the cost is. Plus, on the very end, the challenge, you'll be relying on this to report how much you spent on your tokens. Okay, going back to your OpenClaw TUI session, I believe. Let me make sure I'm following right. Okay, first, act number 1. That's where we are, local versus cloud brain. This is a scenario that I want you guys to think about. Like, first of all, so I showed you guys that we do, slash model to switch between models. But there might be reasons that you want to actually have a dedicated agent. So I'd say, like, I want to have one agent to always be running my local model, and one agent to always be, cloud. Can someone say like one of the reasons why I want to do that? Like, why would I even want to like have that dedicated agent? Personal data, that's correct. And the reason that maybe you couldn't have, the reason that that main agent wouldn't work, to expand on what you said, is you can actually set rules for each agent. So right now, I want to set the rule for this agent that don't ever touch my personal files if you're a cloud agent. So I want to disable that. If you use one big agent, you can't go set rules like this. It's going to be a lot more difficult. So one of the reasons you want to have this local versus cloud agent to separate the agents completely is that you can set the rules, you can set permissions, and also create the context that is more suitable for that model. So here, to do so, it says open a new terminal tab. We're going to do that. And you're going to paste this command. So all it's doing is basically going through the list of agents I have. It finds that cloud agent and make sure that I disable the permissions to access the local files. Next, you need to restart your OpenClaw to make sure this is picked up because we changed this JSON config file. So again, on the same terminal that I just paste this command, which is OpenClaw gateway restart, press enter, and you should be able to get messages similar to what I have, that gateway is restarted and it's ready to use. There we go. And I'm going to go back to my first terminal, which I had the OpenClaw TUI. So this says start a new OpenClaw session. You can either do a new tab or just go back to the first one I had. Control-C should kill it. And if you just go up or just type this, OpenClaw TUI session workshop, same thing. It will bring up the TUI. Okay, here I want you guys to switch to, actually you are already on the Cloud Brain. So if you are not on the Cloud Brain, you should do agent and then go Cloud Brain. Or just paste that command in your OpenClaw TUI. So you should be able to see something like this that says agent Cloud Brain. Here's the agent that we just disabled it from running the files. So let me just reset my context from last run that they had here. Okay. So basically here I have a prompt ready for you guys. I have a file on the system. I want to make sure that it works. It doesn't access that file. So if I just press enter, and it says read the content of this financial.csv file. Since we disabled the services, it shouldn't be able to access that. And you can see that it gives me, hey, I don't have access to the local file system, and therefore I can't do it. To switch to your local brain, that is another agent we have that is dedicated to that local model. Very similar concept. I can maybe skip this for the sake of time, but if you just do /agent local brain and type the exact same command, then you should see that financial report is actually printed and it works fine. So this is just to show you guys how you can have two different agents, one of them with set permissions to not be able to access your local file, and one of them does. Okay, I'm gonna skip 1B. As I mentioned, it's basically the same thing, but you get the idea. So we're gonna go to page number 3. That's Act 2. This is where are we gonna start doing a little bit more automatic way? So far, you were the router. So you were the one that picking which model to pick based on your need. Now, in OpenClaw, there is a way that you can actually set it up in a way that you always route to one model, and you actually ask that model to tell you if this should be escalated to the cloud model. And that's what we're gonna do next. So to do so, if you remember, I mentioned that OpenClaw has those config files. So switching back quickly to this slide, just make sure we're following. So we just did this part, which basically you have a cloud brain and that has its own config files and local brain, and you can set permissions. Next, what we're gonna do is create a smart router way of doing things, and we created the agent for you guys. So what we're gonna do is basically add a bunch of rules in that main agent sol.md file that basically tells it, for these rules, I want you to escalate to the cloud model, or for these rules, just use local. And that's as simple as that. Going back to my workshop tab. So if you just switch, actually before that, I want to show you quickly what the rules are. So we're going to do one more new tab. So I basically have four tabs total. And if I just paste agent / agent smart router, oh, sorry, no, the first one I'm going to do. The genome text editor, this is the one that we're doing right now. Open new terminal tab. So genome text editor, we paste this, press enter. It should open that sol.md for the smart router agent. So very briefly, every time I'm going to ask this agent to work, it's going to do this. Every single response must begin with exactly one of these two lines. It's either cloud or the local. So the classification should follow with some rules. The rules I have for it is, for example, if I'm asking you to write a code, use cloud. If I ask you to read a file, use local. So these rules are going to be followed by this agent automatically, so I don't need to every time select what model I want to choose or what agent I want to choose, and you can have a more automatic way of doing so. Okay, we don't need this. This is just for your information to see where we changed this, where we had it. The last thing is, just the point is, the way it's going to work if it's going to escalate to the cloud model, it's actually going to create a sub-agent, and that sub-agent is going to have that cloud model, and that's all configured through this sol.md file. Let's close these, go back to our terminal, and I believe this is where we switch to the smart router agent. So if you go here, / agent, go to smart router, and it should be open for you guys to use. We're going to do 2 simple prompts, and then we're going to move to Satya's part, which is the semantic routing part of things. So first prompt I want to show you guys is something that we should see it's happening local, but you should be able to see how that happens. So what does a 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff mean? Because in the rules, I don't have that set to go to cloud, and the local model should be able to handle. You could see that the very first thing we get from here is classification. This is a local model, and therefore it's going to basically go and use the local model to respond to it. This will take a few seconds as if it's going through all the full thing, but yeah, so here we go. Classification local, it's a straightforward factual question, so I'm just going to use my local model, and therefore I got this. The very last part for me before I move on is just to show you guys another prompt that, based on the rules, is following what we ask. So we ask it to, if you ever ask to write a code, it should escalate to the cloud model, and that's what's happening next. So if I say write a Python function to calculate loan interest payments and press enter, since this is writing code, you should see the very first thing it says is classification cloud, so it's going to direct to that fireworks model. And behind the scenes, how OpenClaw works is they're going to create a little small sub-agent, pass it all the context, say session spawn, go do this, then it waits for the agent to come back, and once it's come back, you get the results. This is going to take a few seconds to complete. If you don't get it, you can always just this is one thing that with OpenClaw and agents, you can always bully it. If it doesn't do something or you want, you can actually ask us hey, what happened to the results, or what did you do this, or change your config. So here, if you don't get the results within a minute or two, you can just always go hey, what was the final result? Well, it's time for me to pass to Satya because he's going to cover more of Lemonade, and he's in that team that also worked on Lemonade, and they have that semantic routing baked into it. So I'm going to ask Satya to continue with this workshop. Thank you.
Thanks, Mari. Hey, everyone. So far, we've seen how to hard code OpenClaw configuration files, to help us with our routing. But in this section, we're going to see a more automated setup through Lemonade router. So before we start the hands-on part, just a quick graphic on the system architecture, how this section basically works. So what we have here is a simple setup where you send a prompt to OpenClaw, and it first goes to Lemonade router running locally. And the Lemonade router decides where to send your prompt. So if it's a sensitive question, it goes to a local small model, or if it's a complex question, it goes to a cloud model like Kimi K2.6. Or if it's a complex question that has sensitive information, it goes to a local, slightly larger model like Qwen 3.635B. Now, moving on to the hands-on part. So in this setup, we have defined some skills. So these skills are nothing but where you point your data sources, output expectations, and input guidelines, like how the skill has to work. Basically, we're instructing OpenClaw on how to handle the data or the question. So in this section, you guys are managing a startup where you have where your role is to handle employees onboarding, leaving, answering questions on benefits data, finance questions, legal questions, etc. And we're gonna do this using a set of skills. The skills are defined inside OpenClaw's skills folder. Like these are all pre-configured. If I just open one of them, it's just a simple guide for OpenClaw that this is where you get your data source. You're authorized to do certain tasks. You shouldn't do certain tasks. So that's just a quick summary on skills. Now go to a new terminal, and then let's start a new OpenClaw TUI session for this part. And the first agent is HR admin agent. Let me reset my instance. Yeah. So we have employees.csv data. Basically, it has a bunch of PII sensitive information, personally identifiable information like SSN, email, phone number, etc. Now we're gonna switch to Fireworks, our cloud model, and then ask a simple onboarding question. So as you can see, this is where I'm tagging the skill, the HR admin. If I go back to my skills folder, this is where the skill.md file sits. And I'm going to ask my cloud model to onboard an employee. So to look at the data, this is where we have all the data. This is the employees.csv where the cloud model is currently writing to. So if I open it, as you can see, the Jordan Lee employee got onboarded. But what's the catch here? We just exposed a bunch of sensitive information to a cloud model, right? Now, the alternative here is to use a local model, but how can we automate this? We don't want to switch for every question, right, between a cloud and local model. So in order to do that, we'll be using the Lemonade router. So I'll be selecting the HR admin router from the dropdown. You do /model and then select the user.hradmin router. Now I'm going to ask a similar question, this time onboarding a different employee, Maya. Let's see. So if I go back to the Lemonade dashboard, you can find it at 13305. And as you can see, the local model got loaded. But the reasoning behind this is you can expand Lemonade router and then click on the gear icon next to HR admin router. And this is where you have the basic LLM-based routing. So you select your candidate models. In my case, I've selected a cloud model and a small local model, Qwen 3.69B. And then my natural language and my router LLM is, again, Qwen 3.59B, which decides where to route this question. So the routing prompt is very simple. If you see any personally identifiable information, send it to a local model. For anything else, just send it to a fireworks model, right? Now going back to my TUI, yeah, as you can see, yeah, I think it's got it onboarded. No? It's found some inconsistencies in the question. Okay. Oh, okay. I forgot to change the date, but you get the idea. Like it is supposed to go and write the data. If I change it to first. Okay. Yeah. So in this case, we have like 0 data leaving our machine, and all the data is staying local, along with the routing. Now, while that is running, you can see the Lemonade logs running in the backend, where you can see the TTFT, TPS, and other metrics for this local model. Now, for the second part, yeah, looks like it is done. Let me close this. Yeah, so got onboarded the new employee, and this is done using a local model without any data leaving the machine. Now, moving on to the second agent, our benefits agent. This is a simple, the agent's goal is to perform RAG on a set of data sets. In this case, benefits handbook.markdown. Now, let's directly switch to the Lemonade router instead of going to a cloud. I'm going to select user.benefits router, and then ask a simple RAG question. So if I go to the router and then expand the benefits router, so this is where you define your keywords, regular expressions, and whether your input has images or if there is any tool calling. So these are the set of rules that I've defined for this agent. And this question has, the question basically is asking, when does my 401k vesting cliff happens? So this goes to a simple benefits RAG rule. And if you click on expand in advanced, the same quick rules gets expanded to the advanced rule section. And if I go to the simple benefits RAG, I have the keywords defined here. So if you see any question on 401k or vesting, or if the question is if the question is below 400 characters, route it to a local model. So that's what happened just now, and the question got routed to a local model. And we also have a bunch of other rules for PII and complex queries. I'm going to cover them later. As you can see, we got the response from the local model, and we didn't spend any dollars on a cloud model for this simple question, right? Now, I'm going to ask a slightly complex question. Again, a local model can handle it, but I want to show the difference between the routing scenarios. So now, this time, it comes under complex benefit analysis. As you can see, if I'm asking questions about comparison, analysis, data analysis, et cetera, or any benchmarking related questions, or if the prompt is longer than 800 characters, send it to the fireworks kimi k2.6 model. So now, the fireworks model has answered the question for us, and we didn't have to switch between different models, right? The router took care of all of that routing. And moving on to the third agent, the finance agent. So again, the agent's goal is to perform data analysis over CSV files. These are like a bunch of example CSV files with dummy data. Now, moving on, let me select the finance router, and then ask a simple question about the burn rate. What is our current burn rate? Now, if I go to the finance router, so this should open the advanced rule section, and we have defined different finance-related topics here, and we have a semantic similarity type selected, and we also have like classifier LLM-based routing. So we are using a simple embedding model. What it does is it performs a cosine similarity between the concepts that we defined here and the input prompt, and then it gives us a score of 0 to 1, and in our case, what is our current burn rate maps with simple lookup. And if I go to my simple metric lookup, I defined my label here out of all the 3 labels available. And if the threshold is greater than 0.6, route it to a local model, right? So yeah, so we have our local model answering this question. Now, moving on to a slightly complex question where we're asking about multi-source analysis. So this time, it goes to deep modeling. And yeah, so if I go back to my finance topic, deep modeling concept, and this is where I defined some examples. I didn't put the exact question here, but a bunch of questions that kind of summarizes my input question. And I also defined another label, this time an LLM doing my routing or classification between if it's a complex question or a simple question. So I've asked an LLM, like Quen 3.59b, to classify my question between complex and simple. And if it says, so if either of these 2 rules gets kicked in, that's when the cloud model fires. So in this case, if the complexity label gets more than 0.5 threshold or label, then it goes to cloud model. Or if it's a semantic, if the semantic model, embedding model gives rating more than 0.72, it goes to in this case, as you can see, deep modeling, it goes to a cloud model. So now this question got answered by a cloud model. Yeah, so that's it on our end. We have a challenge for you guys, and the QR code should take you to a form. We have some gifts, so if you can solve this task, I don't know how long we have, there may be 10 minutes or so, just let us know. We're tracking these scores, and you're supposed to use the lowest amount of tokens possible to solve this task. You can use a local model or you can use a cloud model. You can also use Lemonade router or just use plain routing, up to you. And these are the gifts. Yeah, I think we're at time for lunch. So we have a booth there, AMD booth. Please drop by if you're done with the challenge, and we can distribute the gifts there. Thank you. The QR?